great yeshiva known as the Mir Yeshiva that had saved itself by going through Siberia to Vladivostok onto Kobe in Japan, and from Kobe they were exiled into Shanghai. And that's where they stayed all during the war, the terrible war, World War II. This immense yeshiva of several hundred young men, studying Torah day and night, survived almost entirely intact, whereas all the other yeshivas in the world were closed, destroyed, shut down, and their students and teachers murdered. Well, during the war, there wasn't much in terms of medicine and food and comforts in Shanghai. And this Rabbi Bakst contracted a terrible disease. His temperature was between 104 and 105 degrees. He was falling in and out of consciousness. He was taken to the hospital. There were no drugs in the hospital. They were just quarantining him to make sure that the infection didn't spread. The doctors despaired of saving him. However, as a last-ditch effort, they took off all of his clothing in order that he should perspire, and perhaps the process of perspiration would take out this terrible, terrible fever that was sapping his strength. In the midst of his delusions, didn't know what was going on around him. The rabbi said suddenly he saw himself in a great room, a great hall with a huge dais, and at the head of the dais was a table. In the center was what looked to be a judge with a talus over his head. To the rabbi's right was his teacher, who had passed on many years earlier, Rabbi Leib. To his left, he saw another judge. Apparently, that was the judge that was going to determine negative on him. And he realized that this was a tribunal set up to determine his own future. The chief judge beckoned him to come forward. He turned to Rabbi Yerucham. He said, "This is your student?" He said, "Yes, this is my student." He says, "Bocherel, tell me, young man, tell me, who is greater, an angel or a person?" And he said, "A person." He says, "Why?" Because an angel can only do one thing at a time, and a person can do more than one thing at a time. So the judge asked him, "Is it true then that a human being can do more than one thing at a time?" And the rabbi thought for a moment, and he said, "Yes, a human being can do more than one thing at a time, but a human being can only be attracted to one of the two things that he may be involved in." Realizing the depth of the question was pointed. See, an angel can only do one thing at a time. If he's good, he's good. If he's not good, he's not good. But a human being has a good side, a Yetzer Tov. And the good desire wants to study Torah. But he also has an evil desire, Yetzer Hara, which wants his own personal pleasures. And the question that he asked him, is it possible then for a human being to be in two worlds at the same time? One selfish for pleasure and one for God. And the rabbi's answer was, he can have both at the same time, but he can only be attracted by one at one he's attracted to God's world or attracted to his own world of sensual pleasure. And realizing the profundity of his question, that perhaps he might have erred in terms of his own standing, that perhaps his evil desire was there together with his desire for good, and he didn't know where he stood, whether he stood on the side of holiness or on the side of non-holiness. So the rabbi then added, he says, if you let me live, then I promise that I will dedicate my life for the glory of God. And at that moment he woke up. This is a very profound story. The story rings true. But what exactly is the depth of the story? The answer is an angel can only focus on one thing at a time. Angels who are in high only see God, and therefore they realize that there's nothing else, and are very passionate about it. But an angel who comes into the physical body, just as he is only single-minded in the spiritual world, can become single-minded in the physical world, because the angel only sees the physical world. He only sees his own passion. And therefore, when the angel comes into the physical world, he cannot change, because he does not see an alternative to his desires. The human being is different. Even when a human being sins, the soul is still there. And the soul only wants God. So even at the moment of passion, the human being can always change. Turn the whole direction and focus of the life to a different way. So an angel is single-minded and cannot see an alternative. A human being has not just tunnel vision, but also has peripheral vision, sees that there must be an alternative. There's another way to doing things. There are people who believe that the only way to succeed is to be single-minded and determined, and to push everyone out of your way. And sometimes that works for a short period of time, until you reach a situation where you're not familiar with, you're overextended, you're up against someone that's just as powerful as you. And there, the alternative to backtrack, to retreat in order to achieve victory, is a different perspective. That perspective does not exist with an angel or with a single-minded person. A human being who is truly intelligent knows that he must succeed, but also understands that there are different ways of succeeding, and that it isn't the battle that counts, it's the war. It isn't the foothold here, but it's what will be the end game. And so, when you say that a person is not an angel, that's a compliment, because a human being, no matter where they are, has more than one alternative, one way, more than one way of living. And even when a person is overwhelmed by his own weaknesses, at the very moment of falling into his weaknesses, drugs or whatever it might be, the human being always has the opportunity to pull himself out and extricate himself and win the battle, not by being singular focused, but by realizing that there's other alternatives. And that's the lesson of be a person.